Indiana might be a national championship contender. Just let that soak in just for a moment. Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy, and we're so glad that you're here with us on a Monday edition, looking back at week 4 and kind of drawing some bigger picture conclusions. After watching so many games over the last few hours, I'm really excited to share some of the revelations that have come to my mind in watching these performances, checking the level of execution, watching games inside and out, both sides of the ball, even some special teams plays that were sprinkled into the breakdown today. I really am looking forward to it. There are some conclusions drawn, and you know us here at Always College Football. We really pride ourselves in doing the best we possibly can not to be overreactive. We really do. We try not to be hot takes. You guys that have listened to our show in the past, you know that if I'm saying it, I really truly believe it. I really do. In this particular case, there's going to be a couple takeaways, a couple of conclusions that we came to. I think people are going to kind of freak out, for lack of a better word, okay? People are going to freak out. I'm just telling you, based on what I saw this past weekend, some of these conclusions are very much realistic, and I think you guys will understand why when I explain them here in just a moment. Before we get into the takeaways, I want to first encourage everybody. You guys have done an amazing job. The numbers are through the roof. We have never had this much support. We don't have some gigantic marketing budget. All we have are our listeners, and you guys have done an amazing job spreading the good word that we are putting out quality content for college football fans that love the sport, that celebrate the sport on a week-to-week basis. We do the same thing, so we're grateful for those of you that have been telling your friends and kind of pushing people in our direction. We also want to encourage you, if you are new, subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get the podcast. Leave us a rating, leave us a review, whatever you think. We love you guys, and we very much appreciate it. So let's not put off any more time, because these are going to be some takeaways that are some jaw droppers, not going to lie. But we'll kick things off with the Indiana Hoosiers. Takeaway number 1. You ready? I don't think you are. You might want to sit down if you're standing. Indiana might be a national championship contender. Just let that soak in just for a moment. Because Indiana is not a historical, blue blood, a team that is naturally in this conversation on an annual basis. I get all of that, right? And even for me, it's hard to come to this conclusion. I've seen Indiana lose a lot of games in my time as an analyst and as a fan of college football. But I'm telling you, this group feels different. I'm just telling you, they feel different. They just went and dominated an Illinois team that I have some respect for. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say that Illinois is a national title contender. I do think maybe there were some aspects of their evaluation these first couple weeks that would lead to them maybe being a bit of a paper tiger. But anytime you see a team just drag another team 63-10, that I think is outrageous. And the amount of ways that they can beat you is that just most ridiculous thing I think I've ever seen. All right, by the way, this 63 points dropped. That's the most by a Big Ten team against an AP top 10 opponent in the poll era, just so you know. The most points against a ranked opponent in Indiana history. And the Hoosiers became the 3rd Big Ten team with 55-plus points in 3 consecutive games in the AP poll era. That would be the 2013 and the 2017 versions of Ohio State. Fernando Mendoza, their quarterback, was a cool 21-23 for 267 and 5 touchdowns. So the amount of things that he did, he's being compared with that performance to guys like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. Both guys, obviously elite. They ended up going number 1 and number 2 in the draft just a couple years ago. But here's what I think is so incredible about this. I'm watching their defense, and the pressure is just absolutely relentless. And there were times where they didn't even blitz. They didn't overload the protection, and yet it felt like they did. I'm watching, and I'm like, how many guys do they have on the field defensively? Because they are constantly in the backfield. Now, that is an indictment for sure to an extent on the Illinois Fighting Illini and their offensive line struggles. But the pressure was absolutely outrageous from start to finish in that game. And if you look at the way their defensive coordinator structures their defense, the way they're moving and shifting and moving this way, and then these guys are in behind it, sometimes when you move and do that much defensively, it opens you up for some vulnerabilities. It opens you up for big plays that could be created. And guess what doesn't happen against Indiana? Those big plays never come. So when a line is moving from left to right and the linebackers are moving from right to left, the linebackers are almost always in the correct place. And then, oh my goodness, you find a completion. Perfect. Gosh, I got rid of it. I didn't get sacked on this play. I'm thinking about it from a quarterback's perspective. I throw it to a guy that looks like he's wide open. And then in a moment's notice, there's a defender right there. I mean, they're always seemingly in the right place at the right time. They are so well coached defensively. It's a testament to their staff and their quality of players on that side of the ball. But their quarterback now, I watched Fernando Mendoza in this game. He is so comfortable. You know, sometimes when you watch quarterbacks, sometimes it just looks like it's very uncomfortable, right? It just looks like, for whatever reason, they look tight, they look anxious, they look jittery. He was in complete control from start to finish. And there's something too with these wide receivers. I don't think Cooper and Surratt get anywhere near the credit they probably deserve. Those two guys, well, I don't know if they'll be, as good or as high quality or have ceilings like that of what you see with the Buckeyes or with the Crimson Tide or with Auburn or with Georgia or with some other places. Maybe they don't have that ceiling, but I'm telling you, these guys are just productive. They're as solid as it gets. And it just simply, throughout the game, Illinois just couldn't cover them. I mean, these guys are beating man coverage. They're beating zone coverage. Whatever Illinois tried to do defensively, those guys always were creating space and this RPO style of attack. And they must throw 100 slants a game, it feels like. They're always open. They always catch it. Mendoza looks just in complete control. And then the other part to it, all right, so we can't cover them, so we better be really mindful of what they have on the outside. So you now are forced to defend the pass on every throw, and their running backs are off the charts. Like, you look at Black, like, man, he is awesome. I mean, he's got great wiggle. There were a handful of times it looked like Illinois had a defender that was unblocked that was getting ready to make a play, and Black would just squirm right through and go. You got Hemby, who can contribute in the passing game too, and the Indiana offensive line, they did a great job in holding up and protection. So I think the thing about this, like, we didn't really know what to make of Indiana. They were sitting there ranked number 19 in the polls. They were 3-0, but it was against Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State. Like, how much can you really draw from a conclusion standpoint on any of those three outcomes? But when you watch the level of execution, you watch the quarterback play, you look at the disruption that they can create along the front defensively. I looked at last year's Indiana and I thought there's absolutely no way they'll be as good. There's just no way. They lost so many pieces, so many great players off that defense and along the offensive line. They lost a couple great players throughout. I mean, I thought their quarterback last year was great. I thought there were a lot of aspects of last year's team that could not be recreated. I think this year's team's better. They made the playoff last year, and it was not super competitive in the game against Notre Dame. It wasn't that competitive in the game against Ohio State. I think this year's team could actually go toe-to-toe with some of the best teams in the sport based on what I saw last night. That was off the charts good. And then upon further review, it got even more impressive when I watched the tape. The Indiana Hoosiers are the ACF Team of the Week. What a performance from start to finish for Curt Cignetti, and what a statement win. And you Indiana Hoosier fans, you might want to pay attention to Wednesday's show. You guys are going to make a pretty significant leap in the ACF weekly rankings. Just keep an eye on that. Takeaway number 2. We have talked a lot about John Mateer and the advancements that Oklahoma has made offensively. Understandably, right? They're so much better than they were a year ago. But Oklahoma's defense is what makes them a national championship contender. Now, if you look at this game against Auburn, the amount of relentless pressure that they were able to create, the amount of confusion that they at times created for Jackson Arnold, forcing him to hold the ball, it leads to 10 sacks. It was the most in the history of the program. And there was 10, and some places they're now saying it's 9. Like, who cares? Whatever it was an unbelievable performance from that defense, with the exception of just a couple plays. Yes, Cam Coleman gave them tremendous fits. Yes, there might be something they need to address with their corner situation. They start a true freshman. He had his hands full. It didn't work out real well. Outside of that one individual who had a hard time covering in one-on-one coverage, one of the best wideouts in the game, everyone else really, really solid from start to finish. Jackson Arnold was pressured on nearly half of his snaps, including the last 3 snaps of the game. And if you look at how that offensive line for Auburn had held up to that point, he was coming in being pressured on nearly 23%. So they got twice the amount of pressure than anyone had up to that point. It's not like they've played a super weak schedule. South Alabama's a perennial bowl team. Baylor, I think, is a very good football team. So they played decent competition, but my goodness, the amount of pressure was off the charts good. And what I liked most, it's not like they were getting home with blitzes. They weren't constantly pressuring. They weren't constantly bringing these overloads. That's usually how Oklahoma's manufactured pressure in the past, is by blitzing. They got home from a standard pass rush on 8 of those 9 or 10 sacks. It's pretty amazing when you really look at it. And everyone wants to talk about the offense, and I love the offense. But to be honest with you, when watching that game in person, I do have a couple concerns about their offensive line. I do have a few concerns about their ability to be balanced against some of the best defenses in the SEC. And until the second half, I thought the coverage provided from Auburn against those wideouts was pretty sticky. So I liked some of the adjustments that were made, started to emphasize utilizing the slot receivers a little bit more. Auburn went into that game yesterday with their question marks being in the back end defensively. That's a group that had not covered real well in the first 3 games of the year. They gave up 400 through the air to Baylor in week 1. So the defensive secondary was a question mark, and I thought they did a pretty good job throughout most of the afternoon in limiting some of the big plays that Oklahoma has created at times here in the first few weeks. You look at the numbers, and while you watch the game, it didn't feel great from John Mateer. And then you look back and you're like, okay, 24 of 36, 271, a touchdown, a couple of big pass plays that were wiped out because of offensive pass interference. He also added that huge game-winning touchdown there with his legs there to the right-hand side. Mateer is awesome. And I don't think he had his best stuff against what I think is a really good Auburn defense. But the fact that they were able to still get a win, despite their best player not having an A-plus level game, says an awful lot about what this defense can do. Even if the offense isn't at its regular top shelf self, they can still find ways to win. That, I think, is the makeup of a high-quality football team, and being overshadowed by the arrival of the new toy in John Mateer is a defense that I think is as good as any in college football through the first few weeks of the season. Takeaway number 3, Texas Tech is not going anywhere. It's crazy to think. You're sitting there, there's 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Utah goes right down the field on probably their only great offensive possession of the game. It's sitting there and it's 13-10. You're thinking, all right, here come the Utes. Home field's rocking. Rice Eccles is alive. It's a 3-point ball game. Utah's going to get a 3 and out. And then Utah's going to get the ball back with decent field position. They're going to go down. They're going to end up winning this game in regulation. That's kind of what you're thinking there at the 10-minute mark. And remember what the final score was in this game? Yeah, 34-10. So you got a backup quarterback in the game. You're thinking, man alive, how is he going to be able to manufacture much against a defense that's this good? A defense that has been so solid in the first 3 weeks of the season. A defense that doesn't let anybody move it through the air. A pass rush that's relentless with one of the best edge rushers in the entire country. How are they going to be able to do it? Well, first play, after that game gets cut to 3, 32-yard QB draw by a backup quarterback. And then after Utah cuts the lead to 3, in less than 2 minutes, they reel off their own touchdown drive on a great throw by Hammond to Carter on the pump wheel to the left-hand side. When you watch this Texas Tech team, there's a few takeaways that I just am so impressed with. Number one, the offensive line, that's a really good group. A really good group because they just went against what I think is an outstanding defensive front seven. Utah has always been very good in the front seven defensively. And I'm telling you, man, this offensive line held up far better than any of us could have imagined throughout that game. And then what I love too is that when I think Texas Tech, and I'm sure you guys probably think the exact same way, I'm thinking passing attack, right? I'm thinking vertical passing attack, a group that's going to just rip off big plays through the air. There is so much more to this offense than you don't really realize. Their 1-2 punch at running back with Dickey and Williams are off the charts. Those guys are so good, especially Williams. What he does in the passing game is off. He's about as good a wide receiver as he is a running back. The way he catches the ball and takes off and you can't get him down in the open field. That, I think, is something that people are not paying enough attention to. Dickey is outstanding as well. I love their tight end in Carter. I mean, he can do a lot of things for you. He can stretch the field. They utilize him on some swing routes to throw it to him on screens. Like, they have a real weapon at tight end. And there was one particular play in the game. Just the offensive play calling is creative. It's thoughtful. They had one play in the game, for example, I absolutely loved. I'd never seen this play before. They have quarterback standing in typical shotgun. They have a running back to the left-hand side. All right. So most of the time, if the running back standing just to the left of the quarterback, you're thinking the run's going to go to the right. Most of the time. Yeah, occasionally you see some things where you hand it here, he goes back, breaks it to the left-hand side. Yeah, that happens. Maybe you see a little pitch, maybe a little option. So yeah, there are some run plays that can go left when the back is offset to the left. But what they did on this play that made it so unique, they actually took the running back, it was Dickey, and he goes around the quarterback, hands off this way, and they have counter action going out the other way, and it's a gain of 13. I mean, that is just creative, it's thoughtful, and it was extremely well executed. And I am not used to seeing a Texas Tech offense that is that versatile with some of their run game. The other thing that I love when watching Texas Tech up to this point, and it's been pretty much on display all season long, think about when you were watching this game, how often it felt like Utah offensive players were breaking tackles. Because I'm telling you, I could probably count on one hand how often a tackle was missed by this Texas Tech defense. And that's been the issue the last couple of years. The defense has been the problem. That's been the headache. That group is exponentially better this year than they were at any point in the last few seasons. So I am so impressed. They are also super opportunistic. They're punching out the ball. They're swarming to the football. Yeah, they had a couple breaks. Sure. Yeah, there was a long touchdown throw from Dampier over the top that might have changed the entire outcome of the game. It was wiped out by penalty. But I think when you look at how this team has evolved, we have already known that this Texas Tech team can score. We've seen that. The one thing holding Texas Tech back for the last 20 years has been a really stout defense. And it feels like things are absolutely changing under fourth-year head coach Joey McGuire. To shut down a Utah team that had averaged 45 points a game in their first 3 games to just 10 points is unbelievable. That 24-point win, it tied for Texas Tech's second largest margin of victory against an AP-ranked opponent. That says an awful lot about where this Texas Tech team is at. They're off to a 4-0 start for the first time since 2013. That year they started 7-0 under Cliff Kingsbury, but man, the defense, that's what I think has me feeling very, very good about what this team might be. They are in a really good place. And I think the depth and the talent on the defensive side and along the line of scrimmage and their ability to be creative in the run game has everyone in the Big 12 currently, they're on notice, that's for sure. The dude of the week comes from this game as well. It's Will Hammond, the backup quarterback. If you were to tell me on Wednesday of last week when we're starting to think about, all right, who do you think is going to be the dude of the week this year? The backup quarterback for Texas Tech was not on my radar, if you want me to be completely honest. You come off the bench after a pretty scary hit on Baron Morton. That was a scary hit. Baron Morton's down, laying on the ground. You're thinking, oh boy, this is not good. Backup quarterback on the road, hostile environment against a great defense. This is not going to end well for the Red Raiders. Well, Hammond goes in, provides a significant spark to the offense, goes 13-16, 169, 2 touchdowns, also added 61 yards on the ground, including that 32-yard quarterback draw that was massive in retaking the momentum after Utah made that game close. He actually finished this week with the second best QBR behind Damon Williams from Washington, and that was in relief. So our dude of the week goes to backup quarterback Will Hammond for how he performed on the road in what was very difficult circumstances and leading the Red Raiders to an emphatic 24-point victory over a very good Utah team. Takeaway number 4. Miami is the most complete team in college football right now. And we might very well change our opinion on this based on what we see from Penn State, what we see from Oregon. Big opportunities coming for those two teams. Ohio State goes to Washington this week. We're going to find out all we need to know about Bama and Georgia this week. So yes, there's a lot to find out as we move forward here, and some of these matchups start to tell us who's real and who's not. But so far through the first 4 weeks of the season, Miami, to me, stands alone at the top. They are now 4-0 for the third consecutive season. They just beat their rival Florida Gators 26-7. And it's the first time that Miami has started 4-0 in 3 straight years since 2001 to 2004. That should tell you that 0-1 team, by the way, for Miami, not bad. Pretty good football team that year. Maybe the most talented roster we've ever seen assembled. You look at their rushing attack. Like, so much has been made about Carson Beck and what he now means to that team, stabilizing that position. Cam Ward was incredible last year. He got all the attention, rightfully so. He became the number 1 overall pick in the draft. But what makes this team so difficult to defend is how physical they are running the football. I mean, Mark Fletcher goes out, has nearly 120 yards and a rushing touchdown. He has back-to-back 100-yard rushing games for the first time in his career. Marty Brown adds a couple of rushing touchdowns. The defense in this game was off the charts. So we already know that if push comes to shove and Miami needs to beat you through the air, I might be in the minority here. I feel very confident in Carson Beck being able to deliver on a stage like that if it's needed. What I was not sure about, especially against a Florida team that is pretty salty on defense, say what you want about Florida and their challenges offensively, that Florida defense is the real deal. To be able to have guys that can just pound away, and as the game goes along, they get better. And when I watch Mark Fletcher in the fourth quarter is a lot better than Mark Fletcher in the first quarter. He's still really good in the first quarter, but he's a guy that's a workhorse. He just gets better and better and better as the game goes along because nobody wants to tackle a 230-pound guy in the fourth quarter when they're tired. This is a team that will grind you down and will wear you out. But the defensive improvement from Miami has been the most drastic change so far. We know what they were last year. They struggled, especially down the stretch. They gave up a ton of explosive plays. They weren't good from a tackling standpoint. They were missing some pivotal guys up front defensively, and their pass rush kind of regressed as the season went along. They all of a sudden had to start blitzing, and it led to some vulnerabilities in the back end. They don't have to do that anymore. They can take over the game with their front four. They just held Florida to 141 total yards. That's their fewest in a game since 1999. Think about that. 1999. I was 11 years old. The last time Florida was held to a yardage output offensively that's that low. This is the first time we've seen Florida fail to reach 10 points since 2002. They have scored 10 or fewer points in consecutive games for the first time since 1989. So to think about, yes, we're all acknowledging that Florida has some challenges. They went 0 for 13 on third down. That was the most third down attempts without a conversion since 1998. That was a historically great defensive performance from Miami. It really was. And while DJ Lagway, not great. You look at the completions, so many of those completions were actually behind the line of scrimmage. And now Miami, they can kind of take a deep breath and they can focus their attention to Florida State because they're going to take some time off. I think when you look at this Miami team, they are complete, they are physical, and they're a team that absolutely nobody wants to play right now. Takeaway number 5. People need to start paying attention to USC. I've been trying to tell people now for a couple weeks, And I didn't expect you to be watching SC against the competition that they played in the first couple weeks of the season. I don't expect you to. I will do that homework for you. Don't worry, okay? I will do that homework for you. Don't need to waste your time going back and watching what this offense is growing into. I think people will draw conclusions off the performance against Purdue. It was fine. It wasn't great. It wasn't what you'd expect, right? You'd expect maybe a little bit more against a Purdue team that is improved in some areas, but not yet at a point where they should be able to lock down or clamp down what SC is offensively. But what I watched from them in this game against Michigan State was so much fun. I think when you think SC, you think great quarterback play, right? Great quarterback play. Lincoln Riley, you think great quarterback play. And right now, they're getting that from Jaden Mayava. Jaden Mayava right now, currently in college football, leads the country in QBR. He is number one. So his efficiency numbers are off the charts. But what makes this offense super dynamic is their 1-2 punch at running back and their willingness and commitment to the run game. I mean, Jordan and Sanders both are so good. I absolutely love some of the diversity we're seeing in the run game too. I mean, this offensive line, I'm watching the right side of this offensive line. I mean, they are mowing people off the ball. I mean, there were a handful of Michigan State defenders that were 4, 5, 6 yards downfield. And those were defensive linemen because these offensive linemen are just pushing people and just crumbling that line of scrimmage. It is really fun to watch. So they run the rock, they get things going, the offensive line's moving people, and then all of a sudden, the defensive coordinator on the other side is thinking, oh gosh, we got to stop the run, man. This is a beast. Like, we got to get those safeties up. We got to get those safeties involved. Boom, here comes the play action. And Mayava has been so good on play action so far this year. They hit a handful of play action passes throughout this game that were on the money, and it was because of how well they were running the football to set up some of those downfield throws. And then defensively, yeah, there's some things to clean up. There were a couple lapses in coverage. There were a few times in this game when Aiden Childs would break the pocket, they would lose coverage, and he would create an explosive play. That is something that you need to be mindful of. Like, there are things to be cleaned up defensively. But when you watch him, man, that pass rush is really, really impressive. And I got to give Aiden Childs a lot of credit in this game, too. There were 5 or 6 times where it looked like he was 100% about to be sacked. I mean, you had defenders draped all over him, and somehow he pulls a Houdini. Next thing you know, the play's alive. So you got to give a little credit to the quarterback from Michigan State. He's progressed tremendously. But if they can just finish on some of those sacks, this could be a very well-rounded defensive outfit. They have length. They have aggression. I think they've improved along the defensive line. And I think if they can clean up some of their issues in coverage, a couple penalties as well, this could be a very well-rounded outfit as well. But man alive, people need to start paying attention to SC. We had them in the playoffs in the preseason. I'm feeling better about that risk, if you will, that I took, because I think this team can go toe-to-toe with anybody in the Big Ten right now. Takeaway number 6, the top of the group of 5 can play with anyone. Of course, we're drawing that conclusion based on the performance that we got from Memphis yesterday. Rallied from a 28-10 deficit, stunned Arkansas, the largest comeback win in the FBS this year. They won it 32-31. It was the largest comeback win for the Tigers since 2020. They defeated UCF that day when they were down 21. Arkansas suffered their first blown lead of 18-plus points that resulted in a loss since 2018. What I liked about this is that their quarterback, Brennan Lewis, kind of struggled early, completed just 8 of 21 there in the first half. Man, in the second half, he put the Tigers on his back. He was absolutely in the running for Dude of the Week. Very much in the running for that. We could not quite give it to him because there were other aspects in play when it came to this performance, including a fumble by Washington there inside the 5-yard line. But the first Memphis player with 100 pass yards, 100 rush yards, a rushing touchdown, and a passing touchdown since 2005. He had a career best 64 yards and a touchdown on 7 scrambles. Very, very impressive. And of the 290 rush yards that Memphis was able to accumulate in this game, 157 came after contact. It's the most yards after contact in the game by Memphis since 2018. Here's where we're at, though, because they're not the only one. Cal, who was off to a really nice start, they get beat 34-0. And if you really look at Cal these last couple of weeks, it's the offense that's been off the charts, but the Aztecs defense, they pitched a shutout, and they also had a couple of defensive touchdowns themselves. The first was when Staley forced a fumble, scoop and score for McDougal, took it 35 back. Chris Johnson that had a pick six of Cal's freshman quarterback, JKS, excuse me. And it was really just kind of amazing. They also held this Cal team to 65 rushing yards on 31 attempts. That's a cool 2.1 per carry. And they really forced JKS, an incredible young freshman, into some serious problems. So if you look right now, so far this season, the Power Four is a combined 67-12 against the G5. Normally, you'd think that'd probably be about right. But you have to take into account the teams that have lost to G5 opponents. We just saw Kansas State lose a couple weeks ago to Army. We've seen Arkansas now lose to Memphis. Florida lost to USF. Duke lost to Tulane. Cal, like I referenced, gets blown out by San Diego State on Friday night. Oklahoma State loses to Tulsa. I've been talking to some coaches about this phenomenon here the last couple months. And what is the gap? Because we assume there's this massive gap right now between the Power Four schools and the G5. We assume this massive gap, right? Understandably, the resources that the Power Four has access to, NIL, in some cases, you're seeing starters at G5 programs go and just become a backup at a place in the P5 or in the P4 because they have more money. Sure, that does happen occasionally, but it also works the other way as well. Talk to a couple G5 coaches, and they're sitting there and they're kind of walking me through their starting 11 or starting 22. Let's just say on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. They're starting 22. A significant amount of those starting players on their starting 22 began their career at a Power Four institution. And maybe they were a backup in some cases. Let's just say they're the backup at South Carolina at left tackle. Well, now they're starting at whatever G5 program they're at. So the gap between the starter at the G5 program and the starter at the P5 program is not as significant as it once was. So I think when you look at it, and I've been trying to kind of figure it out, it's like, man, I can't believe this because these are good, solid. I mean, Kansas State was a preseason favorite. They're in the Big 12. Florida was a team that was ranked in the top 15 and was coming off a tremendous finishing hot streak there in 2024. They get upended in week 2 of the season. Duke won 9 games last year. It's not like these are teams that are just run-of-the-mill Power 4 teams. I mean, these are good, solid, respectable Power 4 teams, and they're losing to G5 opponents. The reason is because right now in college football, the amount of parity that we're seeing across the board is more significant than we've ever seen it. Why? Because guys are no longer content sitting there and developing as second string or third string players for 2 or 3 years. They want to play and they want to play now. So guys that have Power 4 potential go and start at a G5 program. So the gap between the top of the G5 and say middle to upper tier P4 is more thin than it's ever been before. Because back in the day, those guys that were content sitting there waiting, developing, and playing 2 years at Georgia are saying, yeah, I don't think I want to go do that. I think I want to go be a star right now at Memphis. So the gap is significant. And if you really want to look at it, even within the Power 4, you look at Vanderbilt starting 22, by the way. Vanderbilt starting 22, the gap between them and let's just say Georgia's starting 22 is a lot less than it once was. Why? Because Vanderbilt has been able to go and get starters from other places, and they have a tremendous collection and a tremendous amount of cohesion and several guys that have a huge chip on their shoulder. So I think that this is something that is going to continue. We're going to see more parity in the first 6 weeks of the season. Now, why do I say 6 weeks? Because over the course of time, attrition's going to happen. You're going to have injuries. You're going to lose guys. It's unfortunate, but it's the nature of playing football. There is about a 100% likelihood of you getting injured at some point or another throughout your football career, depending on how long you play. It's going to happen. And it might be something minor, like a tweaked ankle and you miss 2 weeks, or it could be something major where you go down with a non-contact knee injury and you're out for the year. So in the first 5 or 6 weeks, when depth is not as much of a premium as it is down the stretch, these teams can all go toe-to-toe. So for these G4 programs or G5 programs moving forward, the biggest key will be staying healthy. Because much like some of the teams that have started hot and fallen off, that can happen very quickly at the G5 level because of the importance that you have with your starting 22. The difference right now between P4 and G5 is not amongst the starting lineups. The difference is in the 2s, 3s, and the depth that you have and the competitive depth that you have. Because when your starter goes out, there's probably a pretty significant drop off to whoever your backup is right now in the G5. That's not necessarily the case in the P4. So let's watch. Let's see what happens as things move along. And we won't have as many of these matchups as conference play gets going. But it's been fascinating to see the amount of parity that we have, because I thought in the world of NIL and transfer portal, there would be a separation of the G4 or the P4 from the G5. That hasn't happened, at least not in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. But time will tell, because you got to stay healthy, because depth is where those teams could potentially fall off a cliff. Let's go next to takeaway number 7. Who are the top 4 in the Big Ten right now? I'm honestly asking you the question because I'm having a hard time just evaluating that league and watching tape from every single one of those contenders. And I've watched them all so far. It's been 4 weeks of the season. I feel like I have a decent enough sample size to start to draw some conclusions in some cases about what these teams really are. There's a bunch of them, and there's a lot of teams I like. And to be honest with you, the Big Ten this year is much deeper than I anticipated. I'm already very impressed with what I've seen at the top. That doesn't really need to be explained. I think all of us, anyone that's watched football for 5 minutes or 50 years, can probably watch Ohio State and say, yep, they're going to be there at the end. Like I feel very confident in Ohio State being in the mix at season's end at the top of the Big Ten. Whether they win the Big Ten or second or third, like they're going to be there. Ohio State's a playoff team. I'm not sure anyone's going to probably push back on that opinion. We're going to find out this weekend exactly what the pecking order is, either alongside Ohio State or maybe if they're a slight step down when Penn State and Oregon tee it up. So those two teams play this weekend. We're going to find out all we need to know, because so far, to be honest with you, like what do we know about Penn State? Very little, right? What do we know about Oregon? Well, they look like a juggernaut, but at this point, do we really know? I mean, I think I feel pretty good about them. I've watched them. I've got the tape on. I think they're a top 3 team based on what we've seen purely from the eye test. But from a strength of schedule argument, we really don't know just yet. We're going to find out. But all 3 of those teams, I feel pretty confident in being there at the very end. I think the Big Ten's likely to get 4 teams in the college football playoff. Who is that 4th team going to be? I told you earlier in the show just how much respect I have for the Indiana Hoosiers. And that statement win over Illinois was emphatic. I think they are a team that's going to be there at the very end. They have firepower. They have great quarterback play. They have a really disruptive defense. There's a lot to like with what we've seen from Indiana. I've already talked a little bit on this show as well about the USC Trojans. They're currently 2-0 in the conference. They go at Illinois this weekend, get a much-needed bye, and then they'll start on kind of the second season, so to speak, and they can kind of self-assess and hopefully correct some of the things that they've had go wrong there in the back end defensively. I look at a team like Washington. No one's talking about Washington right now. Nobody. But if you look at it, they could have, just telling you, they could have maybe the best running back in the Big Ten. Maybe. We'll see. I think time will tell. They might have as explosive of a quarterback as there is in the Big Ten. Might. We don't know yet. It hasn't been against top-tier competition, but so far, so good from year 2 in Damon Williams. He looks great. They'll host Ohio State this weekend, so we'll get a real indicator of whether or not they're going to be a team here as the season goes along. And what about Michigan, who goes and knocks off Nebraska this weekend? I'm seeing growth from Michigan. From where they were 2 weeks ago, I'm watching the game against Oklahoma, and it's like, man, I wish I could see a little more offensively, right? Like, I know Oklahoma's great defensively. Man, I didn't feel like Michigan really tried to be super aggressive offensively. I didn't feel like they gave themselves a great chance with how conservative their play calling was on that side of the ball. But now, over the last 2 weeks, we started to see a bit of an evolution. And to go on the road and get a win against the Nebraska team that I have a lot of respect for says an awful lot about what Michigan might be able to do if they could start stacking some wins and start generating some momentum and start creating opportunities for themselves here in the next couple of weeks. So I'm telling you guys, that race for the number 4 spot in the Big Ten is as compelling as there is right now in college football. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure I know which direction to point you in if I'm trying to tell you who I think is that team that should be sitting at number 4. And frankly, based on the outcome this weekend between Oregon and Penn State, any one of these teams could be making a pretty solid case for the number 3 spot too. We'll see. Maybe Washington pulls a stunner. Maybe they enter the mix with a big win this weekend at home against the Buckeyes. So I'm loving right now what I'm seeing from the depth in the Big Ten. They're in kind of the middle tier because I thought the league was going to be pretty top heavy this year, but it's proving to be maybe a little bit deeper than we originally anticipated. Let's go next to takeaway number 8. Everyone right now is looking up at Texas Tech in the Big 12. I understand so far that Iowa State's sitting there undefeated at 4-0. I still like so far what I've seen from BYU. I like what I've seen so far from TCU. TCU, I think, is kind of flying out of the radar, but there's a lot to like with what we've seen from them. I like what I've seen so far from Houston. Houston flying out of the radar, currently undefeated with plenty of meat on the bone here in the weeks to come. And I like so far what I've seen in bounce back fashion from Arizona State. That was a good win this weekend, going on the road and knocking off a Baylor team that has a lot of offensive firepower. But if you look at Texas Tech's schedule, based on what they just did on the road against Utah, against a great defense, how they can beat you on the ground, how they can beat you through the year, they have not one but 2 quarterbacks that can clearly play at a pretty dang high level. The way they disrupt defensively, the way they tackle and swarm the football defensively, the way they punch the ball out, the way they're opportunistic. This is a very well-rounded Texas Tech football team. And I think they might have just gotten through their biggest test. And that's no disrespect to what's remaining on the schedule. You look at their schedule and how it stacks up. They're at Houston. It'll be a tough game. I think Houston's a vastly improved football team. They'll host Kansas. I think Kansas has a super dynamic quarterback in Jalen Daniels. I think Kansas will be a team that you might have to outscore them, but I believe that Texas Tech's defense will be up to the task in corralling him and harassing him with that ferocious pass rush. They're at Arizona State. We saw Arizona State already this year play against a quality Mississippi State football team, and they were able to use a plan and kind of contain Sam Leavitt until things got going on the ground there in the second half. Arizona State didn't offer a lot offensively. And maybe here in a couple weeks, there'll be a much better group on that side of the ball. But right now, you tell me Arizona State or Texas Tech, I'm taking Texas Tech. You got Oklahoma State, who that game probably won't be competitive. If you're a Poke fan, you probably don't want to watch that one. That's in Lubbock, by the way. They're at Kansas State, a team that's kind of struggled out of the gate, but still remains close and still remains dangerous. BYU comes to them, UCF comes to them, and they'll finish the season at West Virginia. I'm telling you right now, guys, I think there's a chance that Texas Tech's sitting there 11-1 at the end of the year. And I would have never in a million years thought, with the schedule they have to play, the teams they have to play against, and the parity that we see throughout the Big 12, I don't know who's going to get them right now. Doesn't mean they can't get got, but if Texas Tech goes out and plays their best football, no one in the Big 12 right now has shown the ceiling that we've seen so far from the Red Raiders. Takeaway number 9. The SEC, in a weird way, feels like it's kind of getting back to its roots, doesn't it? When you think SEC over the course of the last 20, 25, 30, 35 years, okay, and there's been pockets in which it's been an offensive juggernaut that has dominated the league. We saw that in the 90s with Steve Spurrier. course, I think when you look at those teams that the Gators had in the 90s, by the way, yeah, everyone wants to talk about Warfel and the amount of points they scored and Matthews and the receivers they had and the points they scored with Steve Spurrier and how much fun it was to watch offensively, but that's pretty good guys on defense too. You look at the 2000s, and it was a defensive driven league. It was a league that prided itself exclusively on line of scrimmage play and solid run games and quality personnel at wide receiver, but it was not a high flying, throw it all over the yard type of league. It was a ground and pound line of scrimmage league. And then in the 2010s, things started to evolve just a little bit, kind of starting in 2013 or so, 2012, 2013. Auburn with their tempo attack and scoring a lot of points with Nick Marshall and company. Alabama and Ole Miss having a lot of great offensive firepower as well. We saw in 2019 maybe one of the best offenses we've ever seen at the college level with LSU. We saw Georgia win multiple national championships with a great defense, but also an offense that I think was perennially underrated. That group on offense was dynamic and very, very good and could score with anyone in the country if the game required it. And while it's easy to kind of draw conclusions here based on just a 4-week sample size in which so many teams have played less than stellar offensive outfits. But if you look right now, there are 7 teams in the SEC that are currently ranked in the top 25 defensively. There are about 6, 7, or 8 teams in the SEC right now that are ranked in the top 25 in the points per game allowed basis. And like I said, you have to take into account the level of competition that some of these teams have played. I understand that, so I'm taking some of these rankings with a slight grain of salt. But I think that this year's SEC could very well be determined by who has the best defense. Which defense plays at the highest possible level. And we've seen already incredible defensive performances from LSU. We have seen already incredible defensive performances from Oklahoma. We've seen great defensive play so far from Texas. We've seen, at times, pretty good defensive play from Alabama, mostly against Wisconsin, but we'll see about Alabama here coming up. And there are obviously a couple anomalies in there. We're just a week removed from talking about Tennessee and Georgia, a game that was decided in the 40s. So yes, there is still offensive firepower in the league, but I just feel like the identity of the SEC is shifting just a little bit, getting back to being a down in, down out defensive grind. And I kind of like it. I got to be honest with you. I kind of like it. And if it continues in this direction, then it might be more advantageous to have a dominant defense than it is a high-flying offense. But we'll see here as the season continues to move forward. Takeaway number 10. And I put this last, but it's certainly not least. We need to address some of the challenges that we currently have in the sport with officiating. We do. At some point, we need to address this. And I will admit, I have served as a center judge in a spring game. So I have officiated a college game. Well, albeit you could say it's a spring game, it's a glorified practice. All that's fair. But I did have the uniform on. I had the stripes. I had the flag in my pocket. I had the hat. I had to spot the ball. The center judge, it's a sneaky, difficult job. You got to sneaky be in shape to do it. I wasn't. So I was out of breath and huffing and puffing throughout the entire game, spotting the ball. Thank goodness Georgia was not a tempo team because I would have died. But I've actually been on the field and I've had to officiate the game. It was very difficult. It was so much harder than I could have ever anticipated. It really was. Trying to see all your keys, understand your responsibility, knowing the nuance of some of the plays that might be made in the game. It's a hard job. It is. But right now, we cannot allow games to be determined based on challenges with the officials. We can't. For example, we did the game this past weekend between Auburn and Oklahoma. And it was a sloppy game on both sides. And there were a lot of great calls in this game. But there were also some significant misses in this game as well. We'll start with the first big moment of the game. Oklahoma throws the ball to Isaiah Satania. He catches it, never tucks it, but did catch it appeared to take multiple steps. The ball is not moving. It is secured in both hands. To me, that looks like a catch. It's caught. It's then stripped out. Auburn recovers, takes it to the house. It's called a touchdown on the field. Perfect, right? So the rule is, if it's called a touchdown on the field, there has to be indisputable video evidence beyond all doubt to overturn the call on the field. Well, to me, I'm looking at it, and I'm not the rules expert by any stretch. I take pride in knowing the rules as best I can, but we have rules experts that are with us on our broadcast that can help us understand what's going on. And we're sitting there, and I'm thinking there's just not enough to overturn this. Like, it might be an incompletion. He might be down. It might be all those things. I don't think there's enough to warrant an overturn. Well, it gets overturned, incomplete, huge moment in the game. It gives Oklahoma 3 points. Later in the game, an Oklahoma player is walking off the field. You can see him walking off the field. We find him. He's walking off the field. Next thing you know, he scores a touchdown. I'm sitting there like, where did he come from? What was that? Where'd he go? Did he just run off the sideline? Like, what the heck? Well, Isaiah Titania walks off the field, never leaves the field. They snap it. He's uncovered, gone. And the SEC has since put out a statement saying that they got it wrong, that the crew did not officiate that play correctly. It should have been an unsportsmanlike 15-yard penalty. On 2nd and 22 or 2nd and 20 plus, a 15-yard penalty would have had them at 2nd and 35. And instead of a touchdown, it's a questionable field goal, at least at that point. So another possible 7-point, maybe more, swing in favor of the Auburn Tigers. And then there were a handful of other plays in the game that didn't really agree with. Missed pass interference penalties, other things. And this is not to just harp on that one specific crew. It's not. I watch games all day on Saturday. Every single game that I watch on Friday, on Thursday, I'm watching games from start to finish all throughout the weekend. I would put the amount of time spent watching games that I do up against just about anybody in the world. Like, I love college football. If there's a game on, I'm watching it. I can't get enough. But when I look at what's going on with our officials across the board, there's way too much inconsistency. And I think part of the problem is that the SEC has their officials, the Big Ten has their officials, the ACC has their officials. There is no central body. Like, I want very much for there to be one central third-party officiating coordinator that monitors every single league. And guess what? It should be meritocracy. The bigger the game, the higher the stakes in the game, should be the crews that have performed the best over the course of last season and into this season. They do get grades. They do get, in some cases, suspended. They do, in some cases, lose money if they don't officiate the game properly. So there is a lot of potential fallout for these officials if they don't get it right. And it is a thankless job. So let me start by saying I appreciate all of you that are willing to go put on the stripes and give back to the game, because I don't think there's a lot of people getting rich by being officials. I wish we could incentivize people to become officials and we can pay them big money. I want this to be their full-time job. I wish we could do it. I don't know what we are right now from a resource standpoint and being able to do that. Now, a lot of people say, well, part of the reason why we officiate and have our officials on a conference by conference basis, the coaches actually want that. Why? The coaches are the ones that can call up directly to the officials after the fact and say, what the heck happened on this play? If there was a third-party independent officiating coordinator, that wouldn't necessarily always happen. So the coaches want it at the conference level. That's why it hasn't happened just yet. But there's some people that believe it'd be better to bring it all in-house under one roof, under one umbrella that policed all of officiating. Some people want to keep it at the conference level. I, for one, fall in the camp. We need to bring it up top. We need to incentivize these guys. We need to give them the resources. We need to make them full-time. We need to do whatever we can to make sure that officials do not get in the way in determining the outcomes of some of the most important games on our calendar. Because it happened this weekend, and it's happened far too often over the last couple of years. So we need to fix it. We need to address it, and we need to get things moving forward in a way in which these issues do not plague some of the outcomes in the future. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Really appreciate all of you guys who have tuned in. Before we go away, though, we want to revisit some of the bold predictions that y'all made last week on all the different channels. So we are now accepting bold predictions on the YouTube page in the comment section. We are accepting them on our social media page at Always CFB. So please contribute some of those bold predictions. We will go through them and we will pick out some of the best ones from the week before. This one is from Nathaniel Penland on YouTube. Gators start winning Saturday. We'll pick off Beck like they did last year. Gators win 34-24. Not the case, I'm afraid. Nathaniel, Miami wins 26-7. Carson Beck goes 17-30 for 160. Did have an interception, so almost right there. Didn't get the win, though, not on the right side of the pick. Let's go to Ricky Ticky. This is on X. Texas Tech will beat Utah and be moved in the top 12 in the polls on Sunday morning. Texas Tech knocks off Utah. They are absolutely rising in the polls. Our poll is the only one that we're paying attention to. I think you're going to like where Texas Tech is when you listen to our Wednesday show. Let's go to JB Moonboy. Purdue beats Notre Dame 28-24. Not so fast, my friend. Notre Dame knocks off Purdue in what was another excellent offensive outing. Still some issues in the back end defensively for the Fighting Irish. Let's go next to Bird 76-33 on YouTube. Auburn 26, Oklahoma 20, overtime game. I'm from the future. Oklahoma knocks off Auburn 24-17. Not sure what future he is from, but I do appreciate it. It was a very, very competitive game, a more competitive game than I think most people anticipated going into. Let's go next to LeBink. Rutgers beats Iowa by 10 plus. Iowa knocks off Rutgers by 10. Weird game, though, man. Felt like Rutgers was in a great spot in that game. Penalty or two, mistake or two, gives Iowa the offensive surge they need. They end up winning the game on the road. Nice win there for the Hawkeyes. Let's go next to UFPE 82. South Carolina beats Missouri 27-22. Not right here. Missouri knocks off South Carolina 29-20. So good try. Continue to submit those bold predictions. We didn't have very many correct ones this week, so hopefully we can have some better ones next week. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Continue to encourage you to like, rate, subscribe to the podcast. Wherever you get the podcast, check us out on the ESPN YouTube channel. We always appreciate you guys. So for all of us here at ACF, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. Intern Sam as well. We hope you have an amazing day, and remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.